Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
You guys move back a little. We'll dig a rescue passage. After analyzing the situation, they discovered a boulder blocking their way, and forcefully breaking it could potentially cause a collapse. It was then that a rescue member announced some shocking news. Their breathing is weak. We need to send them out, else they won't make it. Also, we're facing an issue, Mr. Quarles. There's a rock ahead that can only be blasted open with a small explosive, but we're concerned about the risk of collapse. If we use other methods, it may take us 3 more hours. Ethan contemplated the situation. With the lives of 3 individuals slipping away, he quickly decided, no, 3 of my men are unconscious, and their lives are at stake right now. But if we forcefully detonate the explosives, you will all be at risk, Mr. Quarles. We can't take the risk, and your status dash. Quit it with the status thing. Here, everyone's life is equally important. There is no distinction of rank. Ethan interjected. All right. The rescue team captain nodded after coming to himself. I'll select the best blasting position. Give me 10 minutes. Thank you, said Ethan before stepping back to the side of his subordinates. The blasting work began intensely, and everyone held their breath and listened to the work unfolding on the other side. They were eager to be rescued, but also worried about encountering further danger. One of the team members delivered this news to the communication team, and it quickly reached Edward, who let out a heavy sigh of relief after the call. His only son was still alive. It was the greatest blessing from above to him. As for Josephine, she hadn't received any news yet, for only a few people knew about this information. It was done to avoid disrupting the rescue operation and to protect the news. After all, Ethan's current predicament was likely orchestrated by someone with ill intentions. With the complex crowd of rescue personnel, controlling the spread of information was another way to protect Ethan. In the dark cave, with a loud explosion, the previously obstructing rock could be heard breaking into heavy fragments, and a hole big enough for one person to pass through appeared. Quickly, carry the injured out, Ethan immediately commanded his subordinates to transport the wounded first. The rescue personnel on the other side were ready to receive them outside. Soon, the 3 injured individuals were brought out, followed by the departure of the staff one by one. Mr. Ethan, please leave, one of Ethan's bodyguards urged him to leave first, but Ethan looked at his frightened subordinates beside him. He didn't leave immediately, but stayed behind to calm them down. Go out one by one in an orderly manner. Don't rush. We will all make it out safely, Ethan reassured them. One young engineer covered his face and burst into tears. The joy of being rescued and the fear suppressed within him overwhelmed his emotions. Mr. Ethan. However, the bodyguards hoped Ethan would prioritize his own escape. Let them go first, Ethan ordered firmly. His departure would only increase the employees' fear. Soon, more than 20 employees left one after another, and Ethan instructed his bodyguards to assist the employees who were weak in their legs. However, just as the last employee left, a loud rumbling sound could be heard, accompanied by a muffled groaning in the air, as if something couldn't withstand the pressure. Mr. Ethan, hurry! This place is about to collapse, the remaining 2 bodyguards exclaimed. Get out quickly. It's collapsing. The rescue team members also started to panic. They could clearly feel vibrations under their feet, indicating the possibility of a large-scale collapse. Ethan crouched and crawled out of the hole. Just as his 2 bodyguards emerged, ready to leave, they heard a thunderous noise behind them. Run! Ethan shouted, leading the bodyguards to sprint toward the exit. Everything happened too quickly. The collapse behind them was like a devil that followed them closely. Just as Ethan ran out, he saw an employee, scared and supporting himself at the edge of the hole, panting. He had just been knocked down by the chaotic crowd. Now, hearing the rumbling behind him, he was terrified. "Run!" Ethan grabbed him and pulled him forward, but the employee was too shocked to move his leaden legs. Ethan had no choice but to lift him up and sprint ahead. His bodyguard also came to help. As if they were running away from death itself, Ethan and the bodyguard carried the engineer and dashed through the passage with intense falling rocks. The main group ahead had already reached a stable area. The rescue team captain urged everyone to leave at once while he stayed behind to cover their retreat. When he looked back and saw the bodyguard carrying 2 people, he shouted, "Where is Mr. Quarles? Is he still inside?" The entrance was still shaking, with debris constantly falling. If someone was inside, they would likely be buried alive. "Mr. Ethan." The 4 bodyguards put down the people they were carrying and ran toward the entrance. "Come back." The rescue team captain immediately stopped them. Going in there would be suicide. "But Mr. Ethan and my comrades are still inside," one bodyguard roared worriedly. At this moment, their sense of duty and their bond with their comrades pushed them to defy life and death. Fortunately, the sound of footsteps came from inside the tunnel, and they saw someone rushing out amidst the falling rocks. It was a bodyguard carrying a young man. Their heads were injured to varying degrees. "Where is Mr. Ethan?" "He's behind. Deo is injured, and Mr. Ethan is supporting him." The bloodied bodyguard with a broken head was still shaken. The rescue team captain also caught his breath. He had been given the order to prioritize Ethan's rescue. However, his target was still trapped inside the tunnel right then while everyone else had come out safely. Just then, footsteps were heard again, and everyone's hearts tightened. It was Ethan. He appeared, supporting a bodyguard whose head and face were bleeding. He was covered in dirt, with bloodstains on his forehead. However, everyone heard a sound. It was a terrifying noise from the depths of the tunnel. Ethan had never felt despair in his life, but when he heard that sound, despair instantly spread through his chest. Boom! The tunnel completely collapsed behind them, with huge rocks falling. Fortunately, just when Ethan felt hopeless, several hands appeared to take over the bodyguard from his hands. But just as he reached out, a stone fell from above, and darkness enveloped his vision. He dropped to the ground. "Mother, Father, Josephine, I'm sorry." It was Ethan's last thought before sinking into darkness. "Mr. Ethan." The sky was already bright when the rescue team emerged, and several rescue vehicles were parked nearby, receiving the injured. Suddenly, an urgent voice rang across the space. "Emergency, emergency." 4 people were seen carrying a stretcher and rushing toward an ambulance. After opening the back door, the doctors waiting inside gasped with shock when they saw the person being brought in. "Good Lord! How could it be Mr. Quarles? Why is he unconscious? Quick, save him." The medical staff immediately began dressing the head wound and cleaning the severe abrasions on Ethan's body inside the vehicle. The rescue mission came to an end as the vehicles headed toward the base. Everyone returned to the base, exhausted and rested. The crisis was finally over. Ethan was being brought to the medical room when Edward received the news, and the latter rushed over with his subordinates but was impeded by the emergency room door. "Ethan, Ethan." Edward turned pale with fear, his voice trembling. "Where is Ethan injured? How could it be so serious? Wasn't he unharmed?" Edward turned to the bodyguards. Despite also being injured, they were more concerned about the safety of their young master. "Mr. Ethan was injured while saving us. When we were escaping, he was hit by a stone and lost consciousness on the spot," the bodyguard replied. "What?" Edward staggered, and his vision blurred for a moment. He had a hard time accepting the fact. The emergency room was still lit. Under the operating lights, the wound at the back of Ethan's head was being cleaned and stitched up. His hair was shaved off, and his handsome face looked pale after the blood was cleaned off. Meanwhile, in Ethan's room, Josephine, who had stayed awake until late at night out of worry, was awakened by the light outside the window. She checked the time. Seeing it was 6:30 a.m., she quickly got up, changed her clothes, and came out. She felt a sense of urgency in the corridors and couldn't help but grab an employee and ask, "Has the rescue team returned?" "They're back. Everyone is over at the medical room." Josephine's heart filled with the arrival of good news. The rescue team has returned. That means the rescued people have also returned, which also means Ethan has also returned. Josephine, overwhelmed with happiness, hurried toward the floor where the medical room was located. However, along the way, she noticed many people wearing grave expressions, making her heart skip a beat. Just as she rushed out of the elevator, she saw Jacques walking to the elevator while talking on the phone. "Jacques," Josephine called to him. The bodyguard ended the call at once. When he saw how anxious Josephine looked, he quickly reassured her, saying, "Don't worry, Miss Jacobson. Everything's going to be okay. Mr. Ethan will be fine. He's just unconscious." "What?" Josephine's head spun, caught off guard by Jacques' words. She grabbed him and asked, "What happened to Ethan?" "Mr. Ethan was hit on the head by a rock. He's currently in the operating room being treated. Take me there. Hurry." Josephine was on the verge of a meltdown. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. Ethan had returned, but he had returned injured. Meanwhile, the injured individuals were gathered in the medical room for treatment. Fortunately, there were no fatalities, so it could be considered a fortunate event. Edward, on the other hand, sat aside, waiting for news about his son. When he saw Jacques entering with a young girl, his gaze softened with affection. He stood up and greeted Josephine. "Hello, Miss Jacobson. I'm Ethan's father." Edward's fluency in the language was superb and easy to understand. Josephine's anxious mind seemed to calm down a bit upon hearing Edward's voice. She greeted him, saying, "Hello, Mr. Quarles. Has Ethan come out yet?" "The doctor came out a moment ago. Ethan's vital signs are stable, but he is still unconscious. Don't worry too much." Edward learned from his wife that this girl was the love of Ethan's life and was also her preferred choice for a daughter-in-law. The corridor outside the operating room fell into an unusual silence. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the two sky-blue doors, eagerly awaiting good news from the people being treated inside. 15 minutes later, the doors finally opened. An assistant doctor and nurse wheeled a stretcher out, and there lay Ethan quietly on it. His shaved head made him appear even weaker and paler. Edward hurriedly rushed over, calling out anxiously, "Ethan, Ethan." Josephine welled up at the sight of Ethan being wheeled out. Still, ultimately, tears rolled down her cheeks like beads of a broken string. She covered her mouth to keep her sobs from escaping. However, deep inside, she was beyond devastated. The doctor aside was a world-renowned neurologist. He was engaged in a serious conversation with Edward, who listened attentively, and only then did Josephine approach the bedside. She looked at the man in front of her. He appeared to be sleeping, but why wouldn't he open his eyes to look at her? "Ethan," she called out to him softly. However, the man on the bed did not respond to her as he usually would with a smile. She reached out to hold his hand that was hanging on the side. The icy cold touch and the lack of strength in his fingers pained Josephine's heart. Sharply, "Miss, please step aside. We need to take the patient to the ICU," the nurse said to Josephine with a lowered head. As Jacques pulled Josephine aside, the nurse wheeled Ethan away. Josephine broke free from Jacques' grasp. Her mind was blank, and all she wanted to do was follow Ethan. She escorted him all the way to the entrance of the ICU, where she was no longer allowed to proceed. As the door closed in front of her, she moved to the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the nurses work, observing as Ethan was put on a ventilator and had needles inserted into his arm for 4 fluids. Her heart ached so painfully that it was suffocating her. Soon, Edward also arrived. He gazed at his unconscious son lying on the hospital bed, sighed deeply, and felt a surge of intense worry. The doctor had just informed him that Ethan's injury had not affected the central region of his brain, which meant it wouldn't impact his intelligence. However, it was highly likely that it had damaged the area responsible for memory. Therefore, there was a strong possibility that Ethan would face memory loss once he woke up. "Don't worry too much, Miss Jacobson. Ethan will be okay." Edward comforted her before leaving for other matters. "Would you like something to eat, Miss Jacobson?" Jacques kindly asked. Josephine shook her head and sat down where she could see Ethan. She watched the nurses perform various examinations on him, and her morning passed just like that. It was already 3:00 p.m. by the time Jacques returned from his rest. When he stepped out of the elevator, he found Josephine sitting there like a statue, waiting for her man. Jacques brought a snack with him and handed it to her, feeling bad for the woman. "Please eat something, Miss Jacobson. Mr. Ethan will scold me if he wakes up and finds out I haven't been taking care of you. I really hope he wakes up soon." Josephine felt as if she had been living in a dream these past few days, for everything seemed so surreal. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The rescue team had departed, and the Quarles were preparing to take Ethan back to the family hospital for treatment. Josephine was invited to accompany them. Ethan was taken care of by the medical staff on the plane, and as much as Josephine wished to see him, she could only spend a brief 10 minutes with him. Still, it was already a gift to her. After a 28-hour flight, they finally arrived at the Quarles' residence, and Ethan was immediately taken to the ICU for examination. Donna, who had been waiting at the hospital, had red and swollen eyes. Her heart was shattered, and when she saw Josephine, she went up and hugged the young woman. Both women burst into tears simultaneously. "You've had it rough this time, Josephine," said Donna, deeply moved by Josephine's affection for her son. She saw Josephine's sacrifices and dedication, even braving the harsh Arctic conditions. "I just want Ethan to wake up. It would make everything worthwhile," said Josephine as tears welled up in her eyes. Donna patted her and took the tissue from her assistant before handing it to Josephine. "You're exhausted too. Go rest." "I'm all right, Mrs. Quarles. I want to stay with Ethan." "Silly child, what if Ethan wakes up and finds you collapsed? What would we do then? Go rest." Donna expressed her concern, noticing that Josephine had visibly lost weight. Jacques, who stood aside, chimed in, "You haven't shut your eyes since getting on the plane, Miss Jacobson, and have been drinking coffee to stay awake. As young as you are, you won't be able to hold on. Your health is important. Please rest." Donna was taken aback and urged the young woman at once, "No more staying up, Josephine. I still have hopes for you to become my daughter-in-law. Go rest. We're all here." Donna's words brought some peace to Josephine's heart. That's right, his family is here. They have the best doctors in medical technology. He'll be fine, he'll recover. With that, Josephine went to rest while Donna approached the ward and noticed her husband standing there, exhausted. She hugged him, and Edward held her hand. "He's our only son. Nothing can happen to him. He'll be fine." Donna nodded tearfully. Meanwhile, Josephine called her parents to update them on her situation. She continued to lie to them, saying she was on a trip, and she sent them the photos Ethan had taken for her. "Have a great time. It's good to explore the world while you're young. Heidi sounded happy for her on the other end of the line. I will. I'm a little tired from all the fun, Mom, so I'll go get some rest. Josephine couldn't chat with her mother for too long, afraid that her voice would reveal her tears. All right, go rest. Have fun and take good care of yourself, Heidi reminded. After hanging up the phone, Josephine looked at the photos she had sent to her mother. One of them was a selfie taken by Ethan. He had a radiant smile, and his eyes were filled with light. Josephine's tears unexpectedly fell again. She didn't want to be so fragile. She wanted to be strong, but she couldn't. She missed him too much, yearning for him to wake up. On the table aside was a sleeping pill Jacques had given her to help her sleep. However, without the assistance of medication, she truly didn't want to sleep. She didn't want to sleep at all. Josephine took the medicine and lay down. In a drowsy state, she finally fell asleep. Days passed one by one, and Ethan had been in a coma for half a month. His entire body became visibly thin, and even the doctors were planning new strategies, trying various methods to stimulate Ethan's awakening. Donna had shed all her tears, and Josephine, while waiting, learned to be strong. Donna was already filled with grief, and she didn't want to distress Donna further. Now, it was Josephine's turn to take care of Donna, who had collapsed in the hallway due to low blood sugar from not eating. Another night descended, and Josephine had stayed awake for over 20 hours without rest. Jacques brought her another sleeping pill to help her rest. She knew that if she didn't take a break, she might collapse like Donna. By then, the nurses would have to allocate their time to care for her instead. Josephine sighed and popped the pill into her mouth, washing it down with a sip of water. Meanwhile, Donna was keeping vigil in the ward by Ethan's bedside, holding her son's hand. Scenes of her son growing up played in her mind, and the more she thought about it, the more sorrowful she became. Initially, the doctors had given them hope, and they believed Ethan would wake up soon. However, as time passed, their hearts grew anxious and even desperate. When will Ethan finally wake up? Will he ever wake up? Please get some rest, Mrs. Quarles. A nurse approached to assist her. Donna let out a sigh and said, "It's okay. I'll stay with my son a little longer." The nurse had no choice but to leave. Donna was about to withdraw her hand when suddenly, she felt a force gripping it for a moment. She thought it was just her imagination. At that, she quickly turned to look at her son's hand. Was it just my imagination? Why did it feel like Ethan held my hand just now? Ethan? Ethan, can you hear me? It's me, your mom. Please wake up. I'm begging you. Donna pleaded with grief on the edge of the bed. She knew she must have been mistaken again, caught in a dream. Despair washed over her intensely. Lo and behold, a hand gently patted her. Donna thought the nurse had returned, so she mumbled while leaning on the bed, "I don't want to leave. I can't leave my son." However, the hand patted her shoulder again, and Donna lifted her head to look into a pair of open eyes. She was stunned in overwhelming joy. "Ethan, you're awake," she said and pressed the call button for the doctor's office. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. However, she discovered that Ethan wasn't comforting her, but rather only staring at her blankly. At that, Donna touched his face, whispering anxiously, "Ethan, what's wrong? Don't you recognize your mother anymore?" "Mother?" Ethan called out to her in a hoarse voice, looking at her with unfamiliar eyes. Donna couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She covered her mouth and gazed at Ethan with incredulity. Can it be true that the doctors were right about Ethan experiencing amnesia? Donna bent down and hugged her son, disregarding whether he recognized her or not. Her voice trembled with excitement as she said, "You're finally awake. Thank God. I've been waiting for you to wake up." Just then, 3 doctors rushed into the ward and breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that Ethan had awoken. Fortunately, they didn't have to proceed with the second plan, which was cranial surgery. After all, Ethan woke up on his own. "Please give us some time to examine Mr. Ethan's condition," Mrs. Quarles, one of the doctors, requested. Donna nodded and went out immediately, promptly informing her husband. "Josephine, let her know quickly. Miss Jacobson probably took some medicine and has fallen asleep, ma'am." "Don't notify her for now, then. Let her rest," said Donna, then looked at her son through the window. He was cooperative with the examination, but he has amnesia. Does this mean he has forgotten about Josephine too? Donna suddenly felt a pang of anxiety. How devastated will Josephine be? Edward arrived in 2 shakes, and his mind too went blank for a few seconds upon hearing the news. Although the doctor had previously emphasized the possibility of such symptoms, he still found it difficult to accept the fact. The couple stood outside the glass window, watching their son cooperating with the examination. Although he had lost his memory, his demeanor remained unchanged, that provided them some comfort. Just then, the attending doctor came out and approached the couple, saying gravely, "Mr. Edward, Mr. Ethan's physical injuries have mostly healed. Currently, his memory nerves are damaged, and we need more time to determine whether it is temporary or permanent amnesia. Fortunately, Mr. Ethan is in good health." "Does he really not remember anything?" Donna asked, still unwilling to resign to fate. "Currently, our diagnosis is that he has complete amnesia. He doesn't remember anyone or anything. However, his intelligence and language abilities are intact. He can speak 6 languages and converse fluently. In other words, apart from not remembering the people and things around him, he is still normal, right?" "Yes, that's correct. Therefore, the upcoming treatment will require your utmost cooperation. We need to help Mr. Ethan regain his memory by bringing the most important people in his life to interact with him. We aim to facilitate his full recovery as soon as possible. His most important people, aside from friends, are all here," Donna said. "All right. You may see him shortly." The doctor nodded and left. When the nurse came out to invite them in, Donna and Edward's emotions were complex yet joyful. Regardless, having their son safely back by their side was a blessing from above. Therefore, they couldn't be too greedy. They had to accept the fact that their son had amnesia and do everything possible to help him regain his memories. When they entered, Ethan was deep in thought while in bed, and his gaze softened when he saw the approaching elderly couple. "I'm sorry, I've forgotten a lot of things, but I'm sure you're very important to me. We're your parents." Donna went up to Ethan and held his hand. Tears welled up in her eyes as she gazed at the pair of beautiful, amber eyes she adored so much since he was a baby. "Mom," Ethan called out. "Don't worry, Ethan. I'll help you remember us." Edward comforted him as he held back intense emotions. "What happened exactly? Why did I lose my memory?" Ethan asked with a frown. At that, Edward sat down and patiently explained the whole situation to him. Jacques also entered the room, saddened by the news of Ethan's amnesia. He brought Ethan's laptop to him. Ethan's laptop contained many of his own recorded videos and meeting transcripts, which could give him an idea of the person he was before losing his memory. After 4 hours of memory digestion, Ethan's blank mind was filled with a lot of information, which quickly helped him accept his identity. Edward and Donna grew tired and, considering their age, they were persuaded to rest. Only Jacques stayed with Ethan. Even Jacques was mentally and physically exhausted. He dozed off at Ethan's bedside. With Ethan's awakening, the tension that had gripped everyone loosened, and they could finally rest. Ethan, on the other hand, sat by the bed. He had no desire to sleep anymore. He had slept for too long, and he was eager to learn about his past self now. He operated the computer, and as he flipped through the photo album, he came across a picture of a girl. It was taken on a bustling street where a girl casually snapped a photo, her radiant smile enchanting. Ethan gazed at the girl in the photo for a long time. He searched through all the memories that had been input but found no traces of her. However, she felt important to him for some reason. Ethan looked at Jacques, who was dozing off beside him, and patted his shoulder. "Jacques, wake up." Startled awake, Jacques opened his eyes and instantly became alert when he saw Ethan's serious gaze. "What's wrong, sir?" "Who is she?" Ethan asked, pointing to the person in the photo. "Do you remember something, Mr. Ethan?" Jacques exclaimed with excitement. At that, Ethan scowled at him. "Would I ask you if I remembered?" Jacques blinked. "Good Lord!" Mr. Ethan's authoritative demeanor remains unchanged despite losing his memory, and his attitude toward me hasn't changed much either. He had hoped that with Ethan's amnesia, the man would be a bit gentler toward him, but it wasn't the case. Jacques felt it necessary to introduce the young lady in a grand manner. He cleared his throat and said, "This young lady's name is Josephine Jacobson. She is from Zoravia and is your beloved, sir. She went to the Arctic for you and is currently in the hospital. You can see her soon." "My beloved?" Ethan's gaze softened at that. "Yes, and you are her beloved as well." "You both love each other," Jacques said. Shoot, Miss Jacobson won't be able to handle Mr. Ethan's amnesia, he thought. They are so in love, yet he has forgotten all about her. "You said she's here too, right?" Ethan asked, to which Jacques nodded in affirmation. "Yes, she's here. She's just resting because she's worn out." Ethan returned to the photo, his hands supporting his forehead as he desperately tried to dig up any memories of her. Alas, he couldn't find a single trace of her in his memory, even when his mind became chaotic. "Give it a rest, Mr. Ethan. Don't force yourself. Just fall in love with each other again." Jacques empathized with Ethan, who sighed dejectedly. "I'm useless." "No, the reason you got hurt and lost your memory is because you saved a lot of people." "Mr. Ethan, in my heart, you are a great person," Jacques said admiringly. Ethan doubted the man's words. Still, he stared at the photo, unable to divert his gaze. "Is this woman really my beloved?" It was already dawn, and the doctor came to examine him again. Ethan got out of bed as well. After lying down for too long, his body felt a bit stiff. He took Jacques for a walk outside. Although Josephine had taken sleeping pills, her sleep remained shallow. When the sunlight poured into the room, it woke her up. She opened her eyes, immediately threw off the covers, and got out of bed. After freshening up, she went out. When she arrived at Ethan's ward and pushed open the door to find an empty bed, she was startled, and her breath caught in her throat. "Where is Ethan? Where is he? Is he being resuscitated again? Did something happen to him?" Feeling frightened, she turned around and grabbed a nurse. "Where is Ethan?" "I'm not sure." The nurse shook her head, for she had just started her shift. Josephine felt even more terrified in response. Her mind had been prone to wandering lately, and now, she was imagining even worse scenarios. Tears welled up in her eyes. Could it be that his condition worsened during my sleep, and he has been transferred to another hospital? She looked up amidst her panic. She turned around to search for Ethan's parents only to be stunned the next moment as just a few feet behind her was an awoken Ethan. He was gazing at Josephine while observing her. Overjoyed, she disregarded everything and rushed toward him. "Ethan!" she bawled as she threw herself into Ethan's arms. "You're finally awake!" She cried tears of joy, knowing he would wake up. Ethan lowered his head and looked at the girl in his arms. Her trembling body pressed tightly against him due to happiness. However, he felt unsure and helpless. Jacques quickly gestured to him and explained, "Mr. Ethan, this is Miss Jacobson, your beloved." Ethan, of course, knew that. He reached out and patted her shoulder to reassure her. Josephine looked up and took a step back. Her eyes examined him from head to toe. "Are you okay? Do you feel any discomfort?" At that, she looked into Ethan's profound eyes. Suddenly, her heart squeezed. Why does Ethan's gaze look so unfamiliar? Amidst her stupefaction, Ethan, too, gentlemanly withdrew his hand and said, "I'm fine. It's just that I've lost my memory." "I'm sorry, Josephine." He blinked nervously. "I'm not mistaken, right? Her name is Josephine, right?" Josephine's mind went blank for a few seconds. She didn't want to accept, nor did she want to believe, that Ethan had lost his memories and forgotten all about her. Just then, the nurse came over to get Ethan. "Mr. Quarles, please see the doctor in his office." "Lead the way, please," Ethan said to the nurse. Before he left, he glanced at Josephine. "Goodbye." He greeted her as if she were a stranger, and coupled with his behavior, it made Josephine feel like something was gripping her heart tightly. She could barely breathe, and her heart ached terribly. Ethan truly lost his memories. He had forgotten all about her, which made them strangers once more. After Ethan left, Josephine put a hand on her forehead as she felt dizzy. At the side, Jacques hastily supported her and helped her sit on a leisure couch nearby. Then, he comforted her. "Miss Jacobson, we should think positively. First of all, Mr. Quarles finally woke up. Secondly, he's all right, save for the fact that he lost his memories. Thirdly, you can try to get him to fall for you again." Jacques' words were effective enough. Josephine sighed in her mind. Yes, Ethan's safety was the single thing she prayed for the most. He injured his head, so it was already a blessing that losing his memories was the only consequence. Is he truly all right except for the memory loss? Josephine asked. Yes. He woke up late last night, and the doctor did a thorough examination on him. What about Mr. and Mrs. Quarles? Just like you, they found it difficult to accept at first, but when they saw Mr. Quarles waking up in one piece, they accepted the truth. Even though he lost his memories, he maintained some of his original habits and personality, so I believe that he will regain his memories soon. Miss Jacobson, please give him some time. Josephine nodded. She truly couldn't ask for more. It was good enough news that Ethan woke up and was alive. It wasn't that important anymore whether he remembered her or not. Yes, she could get to know him and have him fall for her all over again. Of course, even if he couldn't love her in the end, she would wish him all the best in life with a smile. At that thought, Josephine felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she held them back. Just then, Jacques saw Donna walking over to them. Hence, he said politely, I have some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave now. Donna sat down beside Josephine. Judging by Josephine's expression, Donna knew that she already learned about the situation. Josephine, I understand that Ethan's amnesia is a huge shock to you. It is for me, too. He's the son I raised, after all. He's my pride, and also my everything, Donna said emotionally. Josephine looked at Donna's reddened eyes, finally realizing that she had only lost her short and passionate romance with Ethan, unlike Donna, who had lost even more than that. Donna must be in even more despair than her. Mrs. Quarles, if you spend more time with him, he'll return to you, Josephine comforted. Donna. But what about you? Josephine, what is your choice? Will you continue to stay by his side, or will you return to your country and fall in love with someone else? Donna asked, her heart aching. Josephine's pretty eyes widened a little. I know this is unfair to you, but I don't know what sort of girl Ethan will fall for in this new state. Of course, I support you staying by his side, but I worry that you'll get hurt," Donna said worriedly. She couldn't guarantee that her son, who seemed to have changed his personality, would fall in love with the same woman again. I'm not scared of getting hurt. I'm not scared of anything, Mrs. Quarles. Let me stay by his side for 3 months. If he still can't remember me by then, I'll leave," Josephine begged. Donna reached out and took Josephine's hand, saying, "Miss Jacobson, I didn't mean to chase you away. I'm just worried that you won't be able to bear the hurt when you spend time with Ethan." "I'm not afraid. I want to help him regain his memories." Josephine's gaze was determined. Donna nodded and said in support, "All right. If you're determined to return to his side, I promise I'll help you." Josephine looked at Donna gratefully. Her fragile heart was filled with a sense of helplessness earlier, but Donna's words gave her strength and made her feel secure. Just then, a tall silhouette approached. Although he was dressed in a hospital gown and had his head shaved, his unique aura was as strong as ever. His eyes were on the 2 women on the couch, one of them his mother and the other the love of his life. Ethan crouched down and greeted Donna. "Hey, Mom." Then, he fixed his eyes on Josephine for a few seconds before he greeted her with a faint smile, "Hi." Josephine kept a lid on her emotions and smiled back. "Hi. You'll need to be under observation for a few more days, Ethan, and then I'll take you home." Donna pushed him into the seat beside Josephine. "You two talk. I'll look for your father." He was a little nervous as he glanced at Josephine. In his eyes, she was like a frail little kitten, as if she would cry over a single misspoken word or unintentional misunderstanding. "I'm sorry. My memory loss has hurt you greatly. But I know that we were deeply in love. Are you willing to let me be reacquainted with you?" Ethan had a pleading look in his eyes. His heart was telling him that he needed to get to know her again. Josephine cast aside her sorrows too. She knew that now that things had come to this, her only choice was to face the situation head-on. There was no way she could avoid it. "All right. Let's get to know each other again." Josephine looked at him with warm, gentle eyes and held her hand out. "My name is Josephine Jacobson. I'm 25 and I currently work as an anchorwoman at a television station." Ethan stuck his hand out and Josephine grasped his hand at once. As they held each other's hand, Ethan could feel the strength emanating from hers. He was studying her intently. There was something so spellbinding about her that made it impossible for him to tear his eyes off her. "I have to regain my memories of her," he thought to himself. "I want to know just how much I love her." "I'm sure you know more about me than I do," Ethan said with a smile, though his eyes were filled with remorse. Josephine smiled. 3 days later, Ethan was discharged from the hospital. Josephine followed him back to Quarles' residence, and as she stood in front of the massive estate, she realized that she knew nothing about Ethan's family. They were rich beyond imagination. Josephine was struck dumb. The light of the evening sun made the dazzling estate glow even more beautifully. The rose garden, the massive neoclassical structure, and the pretty fountain by the entrance all made the place feel as majestic as a palace. Josephine followed Donna and the others in. Over a dozen of the household staff were waiting by the entrance to greet them. They were observing Josephine with interest too. She was a pretty young woman standing beside Ethan, and that was enough for them to deduce that she was no ordinary guest. As members of the household staff, they had to have in-depth knowledge of every member of the family they served. That was essential in ensuring that they could serve the family without making mistakes. Meanwhile, Ethan felt a sense of familiarity. He tried to trace his memories as he moved through the place. He had a feeling that the spot he was heading to was the garden, and sure enough, when he got there, it was a lovely little garden. He moved toward what he felt was the bathroom, and when he arrived, it was indeed a bathroom. Ethan was thrilled. Although he had lost his memories, he still had some behavioral memories left in him. The household staff brought Josephine's luggage upstairs. She saw Ethan standing by a French window and walked over to him. Ethan heard the sound of footsteps and quickly turned around. "Joey, I have a strange sense of familiarity with this place." All my instinctive assumptions were all accurate. Josephine was happy for him. "Perhaps this means you'll be able to recall your memories soon. I hope it'll come back to me as soon as possible." Ethan fixed his eyes on Josephine. "I don't want to make you wait too long." Josephine blinked, then a smile slowly crept onto her face. The look in Ethan's eyes, as he stared at her, was somewhat familiar to her. Although it lacked the affection and intimacy that it used to have, she was happy that Ethan wanted to recover his memories for her sake. Ethan led Josephine up to the southern corridor of the third floor. That was where Ethan's room was. The household staff had placed Josephine's luggage inside the living area of his bedroom suite. Josephine blushed at the sight of it. "Does Mrs. Quarles want Ethan and me to share the same room?" While Josephine didn't mind, she didn't know if Ethan would. By now, Ethan no longer needed to keep his head bandaged. He had a scar that was less than 2 inches long, and it did nothing to affect his attractive looks, though his shaved head added an air of masculinity to him. Josephine cleared her throat. "Ethan, do you want to sleep in separate rooms?" She knew that in Ethan's mind, she was still a stranger. It would be quite awkward for him to be so intimate with her when he didn't have feelings for her. What if he doesn't like to be disturbed? He might need his space to carry out his private matters. "I'm fine either way." Ethan shook his head and let Josephine decide. Josephine mulled it over. Even though she wanted to get close to Ethan as soon as possible, he didn't know her at all, and she ran the risk of leaving a bad impression on him if she got too physically intimate with him so soon. In the end, she decided that they should sleep in separate rooms. She was afraid that being in the same room would only make it impossible for her to resist the urge to be intimate with him. She reminded herself to keep her emotions in check for now. "Let's wait until Ethan likes me again. I think it's best if we sleep in separate rooms for now," Josephine said. "Why don't you take the bed? I can take the couch." Ethan had no problem with sharing a room with her. "That won't do. You should be resting and recuperating. How can I possibly let you sleep on the couch?" "Let's just wait until you've fully recovered and see," Josephine declared. Ethan had no choice but to go along with her choice. "All right. I respect your decision." He's just as gentlemanly as ever. Josephine's eyes were filled with love and adoration. The warmth and intensity of her gaze made Ethan feel a surprising flicker of bashfulness. He was too shy to meet her gaze. Josephine chuckled when she saw Ethan getting embarrassed, and that didn't escape Ethan's notice. Her clear eyes sparkled like the stars. He wasn't at all surprised that his past self had fallen in love with her. Even now, he who had lost all his memories was still enraptured by her. Josephine chose the guest room beside Ethan's bedroom. They were the only two who stayed in this section of the house, so they would not be disturbed by anyone. Dinner was a sumptuous feast. Donna was a very hospitable host. She was also glad to see that despite having lost his memories, Ethan paid just as much care and attention to Josephine as ever. Truth be told, she was worried that her son would distance himself from Josephine after his memory loss, or perhaps fall in love with another woman. Either one of these situations would undoubtedly hurt Josephine. And, when Ethan did regain his memories, he would feel extremely guilty and remorseful as well. Thus, the best possible outcome was for Ethan to fall in love with Josephine once more and resume their relationship. At night, the estate lit up with light. Josephine was in her room sorting out her belongings when Donna brought some clothes over for her. They were all pretty dresses from luxury brands. Due to Josephine's line of work, she rarely wore dresses. However, the dresses did suit the atmosphere of the place better. As Josephine lay in bed that night, she couldn't fall asleep. Her mind was filled with thoughts of Ethan, who was sleeping in the room next to hers. What's he doing? Has he fallen asleep yet? I wish I could go over and see him. I wish I could talk to him. All of a sudden, a knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Is someone here to give me something? She got out of bed and opened the door to find a man in pajamas staring at her with a look of hunger in his eyes. Can we talk? Josephine wasn't going to say no. While Ethan was in the hospital, the doctors dropped by often and Ethan's family was around most of the time too, so she wasn't able to talk to him in private. She really wanted to spend some alone time with him too.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.